I'm reading Barack Obama's memoirs at the moment. Well, volume 1 anyway. In it, he talks about the huge enterprise of running an election campaign, which is truly mind-boggling. One part which stood out to me is when he spoke about the kind of campaign he wanted to run. He said, "Compared to other modern presidential campaigns, we really were different, consistently emphasising a positive message, highlighting what I stood for rather than what I was against. Still," he admitted, "we sometimes fell short of our high-minded rhetoric." I don't know about you, but I can become very disillusioned with the nature of politics, especially when the tactics become about ripping your opponent to shreds and constantly finding ways to discredit them, rather than showing what you stand for and why you believe you would be right for the role. I imagine that most people who go into politics have high ideals and then at various points are faced with moments of decision, defining moments when you have to ask yourself, what kind of person am I going to be? How much am I going to compromise those high ideals for the sake of winning? Am I going to do what is easy, or am I going to do what is right? Jesus' time in the desert, and in particular this experience of wrestling with temptation, is one of those defining moments of decision. Just before the Spirit led him into the wilderness, he had been baptized and heard those wonderful words of identity and affirmation as God spoke over him, "This is my Son, whom I love. I am well pleased with him." Jesus knew who he was, knew God's love and belief in him, and armed with that knowledge, he entered this period of preparation before starting his earthly ministry. We are told that Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. And the number is significant because it echoes the story of another period in history. It immediately draws the mind to the account of the people of Israel, who spent 40 years in the wilderness. God had freed them from slavery in Egypt and brought them through the waters of the Red Sea, and eventually they came to the land God had promised them. But before they reached it, there were 40 years of wandering, 40 years where the people of Israel repeatedly messed things up by turning away from God rather than remaining faithful to him. And here we have the account of Jesus, who had been through the waters of baptism and was now entering his desert experience. I can only imagine that after 40 days in the wilderness, the initial high of his baptism experience and those words God had spoken over him had probably become much more faint in his memory. After a long period of fasting, the description we have of Jesus is that he was hungry. And in this low moment, when Jesus' energy and strength was waning, he faced the tempter. It was a moment of testing, a defining moment when Jesus had to choose what sort of person he was going to be, what sort of Messiah. And the tempter came with an if. If you are the Son of God, then. The questioning tone was designed to undermine Jesus, to undermine that sense of self and make him doubt those words that God had spoken to him. And the tempter then latched onto the most pressing desire that was coursing through Jesus, that hunger that he felt. Showed him how easy it would be to use his miraculous power to satisfy that hunger. It was the temptation to use his power for his own gain. "You don't really need to be like other human beings," said the tempter. "If you are the Son of God, you can have what you want. It's no big deal. Just tell the stones to become bread." And then a second temptation was presented, again with that if. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down and God's angels will catch you. Gosh, wouldn't that be remarkable, says the tempter. And then you would know for sure that God loves you. And everyone will see this incredible sight and know who you are. You will be famous. And then one final temptation. All this I will give to you if you will bow down and worship me. The kingdoms of the world can be yours, says the tempter. Everything you see, all the riches and resources at your fingertips. All you need to do is bow to me and I will give them to you. It's as easy as that. No need for hunger, no need for pain, no need to die. Why go to the cross when I can give you everything you could ever dream of? Use your power to look after yourself. Use your position to become renowned. Receive the world and its riches by doing a deal with the devil. But the words of God rooted Jesus. You are my son whom I love. And even in his hunger and weary state, he did what the people of Israel could not do. He remained faithful. Faithful to God, faithful to God's ways, faithful to God's promises. You tell me to make these stones become bread, but it is written that one does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. You tell me to throw myself down and let God catch me, but it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. You tell me that I can have the world if I bow down to you, but it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. This was the critical moment of decision when Jesus needed to decide what kind of campaign he was going to run, what kind of Messiah he was going to be. The way of self or the way of selflessness? The way of significance or the way of serving? The way of the world or the way of the cross? Where the people of Israel failed in the wilderness and let God down by constantly turning away, Jesus remained firm. He kept his faith in God and in God's way, and he sent the tempter packing and placed himself in God's hands. And we have that moment of relief as the angels attended to him. The epic battle of wills had been fought and won as the voice of God overwhelmed the voices of temptation. Now, this battle of wills, I think, is one which takes place in us too, each and every day, perhaps some days more than others. And there are moments of decision we face when we have to think about what kind of campaign we are going to run in this life. When we have to make those choices around doing what is easy and doing what is right. The voice of the tempter whispers in our ears and in our hearts too. It can be the voice of insecurity or the voice of bravado. The voice which says you are nothing, or the voice that says you are the only one that matters. It is a seductive whisper which beckons us to follow and shows us shiny things and tells us that we need them, that we deserve them, that we are owed them, and that they will make everything better. Ultimately, it's the voice which leads us to doubt God and doubt God's love for us. It's the voice that tells us that we need to do more or be more or have more in order to make ourselves acceptable to other people and acceptable to God. But the truth is that God loves us already, has loved us from before we were born with a love that is unwavering. We don't need to be perfect to win God's approval. Yes, we have fallen short, and you know what? We will fall short again. But God's approval has come in his Son, Jesus, who has done for us what we could never do for ourselves. When we hear that niggly little voice inviting us to pursue money or power, the voice chipping away at our faith and making us doubt God and doubt ourselves, then it's time to up the volume of the voice of God in our lives, the voice of truth and grace, the voice which said to Jesus, "This is my Son whom I love," and which says to you and to me, "You are my son, you are my daughter. I created you, I love you, and I have sent Jesus to invite you home." That's the voice that we need to be listening to in our lives.